Starting in 1978, Kenner was on top of the mountain, at least in the action figure market. They had got to the top with little fight, thanks to the success of the Star Wars film. With the sequel in 1980, it was hard for any toy company to even get close to the top of the mountain. However, the other toy companies were not going to just sit back and be ruled by a plastic Jedi empire. The other two big companies, Mattel and Hasbro, had tricks up their sleeves. They would go after the kids at home daily.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
In 1982, Hasbro relaunched its popular G.I. Joe line, now smaller and more fun for kids. The figures might have been about the same size as Star Wars figures, but these had moving parts, legs that could bend, elbows that work, and a waist that would twist. You could place them in the ships or some other toy and make it look like they were sitting down, not just stuffed inside with their legs sticking straight out.
He-Man.
Beastman's so mad for battle armor, He-Man.
Mattel at the time was the queen of the girl mountain, but they decided it was time to take on Star Wars. So in early 1983, they released He-Man, Masters of the Universe. And these figures were nowhere close to looking like Star Wars figures. They were bigger, had action features, and huge muscles.
Battle Armor Skeletor and He-Man figures each sold separately from the Masters of the Universe collection. Beastman figure also sold separately from Mattel.
From Kenner, it's the Star Wars mini action figure collector's case. Action figures sold separately.
It was clear walking into a toy store in 1983 that Star Wars had strong competition, that the leading action figure line was even starting to look out of date. They were small. They didn't really do much more than just turn their head and move their arms and legs. Han Solo couldn't do a quick draw with that blaster at his side. Luke couldn't even bend his knees when he sat down. For kids of 1983, Star Wars toys were starting to look like the toys their older brother played with back in the 70s.
I've got the Force!
It's the blazing power of the new Star Wars SSP van set with features like headers, mag wheels, custom grills.
But this was 1983, and a new Star Wars movie was about to be released. That meant it would be the year of Star Wars. They saw sales jump in 1980 with the release of Empire Strikes Back, and they knew they would see it again with the release of Return of the Jedi.
Star Wars Return of the Jedi is here. From it, Kenner brings you 65 incredible Star Wars action figures.
In 1982, Kenner had 58% of the action figure market. By the end of 1983, even with the release of a new Star Wars film, they had dropped to 39%, less than half of the market. Worst of all, Mattel had 27% of the market due to the He-Man action figure line. It was reaching the top of that toy mountain fast. It wasn't all doom and gloom for Kenner. In 1982, Kenner saw 97,000 in sales, and that jumped to 124,000 for 1983. They were still king of the mountain, but with no plans for a new Star Wars movie anytime soon, and with He-Man and G.I. Joe getting fast, who had daily cartoons on television, they knew something had to be done. But what could Kenner do? Unlike Mattel and Hasbro, Kenner was locked into the movie and waiting each year for a new one. The other guys, they each had a cartoon series on television that was for the most part a 30-minute ad for the toy lines. Kenner would have to watch Return of the Jedi over and over trying to pick out background aliens and minor characters for the 1984 line, while over at Mattel and Hasbro, they could think of a cool new action figure or accessory, have it appear in the cartoon, and have it on the toy shelves all about the same time. How could Kenner compete with that? If that wasn't bad enough, Mattel had really started to go after Kenner, even poking fun at the old-looking Star Wars toys in ads. He-Man wanted to plant his battle axe on top of that mountain, right outside Luke Skywalker's head. But Kenner wasn't going to go out without a fight. Even with no film in the planning, they knew not one but two new Star Wars cartoons was going to hit television in 1985. So they would have their 30-minute TV ad, just like the other guys, but two of them. They just had to keep their foot on top of the mountain for 1984, and then the 1985 cartoon series could keep them on top of the mountain for years. So in 1984, Kenner sent out free Star Wars figures to kids who never even asked for them as part of his Young Jedi Knight kit. Using data that Kenner had, they knew the target age group to send free action figures to. And not only would they get a free figure, they would get a coupon for another free figure, a $1 rebate, and a letter from Luke Skywalker himself. They also started a buzz in 1984 when Kenner teamed up with Huffy to give away a speeder bike bicycle. The bike would be given away at local department stores, and then another set would be given away at movie theaters. Between 200 and 300 were produced to be given away. None would be available for sale at retail. There was no way a kid could win this, ride it around his neighborhood, and not be the talk of the town, and possibly the coolest kid ever.
The message, Otto, the message.
Plan 3, release a second wave of Return of the Jedi figures with more aliens and creatures that the kids loved. With nothing new in Star Wars, and this was before you could watch Star Wars at home, Kenner saw more drop in sales. That 39% of the market that they had in 1983 had dropped to 31%. That 27% that Mattel had was now 30%, a number that meant Darth Vader was now sharing the top of the mountain with Skeletor. Hasbro had jumped to 25% of the market and was still climbing high. Kenner knew they had to hold the kids a little longer, so in 1985 they relaunched Star Wars. This time they released figures not just based on the latest film, but go back to all three and pull some figures that got missed over. They also plan to get kids back into buying Star Wars figure by having every figure come with a coin.
Every figure?
Yes, every figure. Hoping kids want to collect the coins as much as they did the figures. Not only would a kid get that much wanted Imperial Dignitary figure, but also an Imperial Dignitary coin. Also in 1985, Lucasfilm and ABC launched 2 cartoons, Droids and Ewoks. Now Kenner was ready, and they announced a figure line for both cartoon series. But even early in 1985, the writing was on the wall. He-Man had pushed Princess Leia off the top of the mountain, and as she hung onto the side, G.I. Joe kicked her in the face. Kenner knew they had been beat. The sales of the Power of the Force line were weak, with the action figure line hitting clearance sections at most stores. And both cartoon series would be canceled in less than a year, and so would the Kenner Ewok and Droid toy line. At the end of 1985, Kenner closed down any plans for Star Wars. Although for the next couple of years, Star Wars would pop up again. In 1987, there were even plans to bring Star Wars back to the toy aisle, this time more in the style of the mass figure that Kenner was having success with. That plan for a mass-style Star Wars line was shot down, as Kenner, and mostly everyone else, believed Star Wars was dead. It would take almost 10 years for Star Wars to come back to the toy stores, and this time, owned by Hasbro, they knew what it would take to get back on top of that toy mountain, something He-Man had in the 80s that Luke Skywalker didn't. Muscles.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.